Sometimes life doesn't test a man with enemies. It tests him with love, not one love, but two hearts he cares for, two souls expecting strength, fairness, and presence. When a man is dealing with two loved wives, the struggle isn't desire or choice. The struggle is responsibility. It's learning how to stand steady when emotions pull in different directions, how to stay honest when silence feels easier, and how to remain just when the weight feels unbearable. This isn't a story about winning. It's a story about balance, discipline, and becoming a better man, not for praise, but for peace. Today, this talk is about overcoming that inner conflict and choosing character over comfort every single day. A man facing the reality of loving two wives learns quickly that life is no longer simple, and it was never meant to be. Each day asks him to show up with clarity when his heart feels divided, to act with calm when emotions rise like weather he cannot control. He discovers that love is not a feeling he can lean on. It is a duty he must carry. Responsibility becomes the language he speaks when words fail. He understands that affection alone does not keep a home standing, consistency does. He learns to measure his actions, not his intentions, because intentions are silent while actions echo. When he walks into a room, he brings the weight of promises made and the awareness that every choice leaves a mark. He begins to see that fairness is not a theory, but a practice repeated daily, often quietly, often without applause. He learns to listen more than he speaks, because listening slows the urge to defend and opens space for understanding. He notices how easily misunderstandings grow when attention is uneven, how quickly silence can feel like neglect. So he trains himself to be present, not perfectly, but deliberately, knowing that presence is the rarest form of respect. He wakes early, not to escape, but to prepare. Preparation becomes his shield against chaos. He plans his time with intention, knowing that time is the one resource he cannot multiply. He learns that showing up late is not a small mistake, it is a message. He learns that forgotten details become symbols of carelessness. So he keeps notes, remembers dates, notices patterns, not because he is calculating, but because he is committed. He understands that love without structure becomes confusion, and confusion breeds resentment. He chooses structure not to control, but to protect. He protects the dignity of each relationship by refusing to compare them. Comparison is the quiet thief that turns affection into competition. He does not rank, measure, or justify. He treats each bond as complete on its own terms, deserving of respect without reference to the other. He learns restraint in speech. When frustration rises, he slows his voice. He chooses words that explain rather than accuse. He resists the temptation to vent, because venting often feels honest but leaves damage behind. He understands that honesty does not require harshness. He learns to pause before responding, to breathe before deciding. He learns that strength is not volume, it is control. When he feels misunderstood, he does not retreat into bitterness. He clarifies. When he feels pulled apart, he grounds himself in principles that do not change with mood. He anchors himself to consistency, knowing that consistency builds trust even when feelings fluctuate. There are days when he feels stretched thin, when expectations arrive faster than solutions. On those days, he reminds himself that responsibility is not about pleasing everyone in the moment. It is about acting in ways he can stand by later. He accepts that discomfort is part of the role he has chosen. He does not romanticize the struggle, but he does not resent it either. He understands that leadership in the home is not authority, it is service. Service requires humility. Humility requires self-awareness. He looks inward regularly, questioning his motives, correcting his habits, adjusting his pace. He learns that apologies are not admissions of weakness. They are tools of repair. He apologizes without excuses, listens without interrupting, changes without announcing. He recognizes that attention must be intentional, not reactive. He does not wait for conflict to engage. He checks in before tension builds. He asks questions that invite honesty, rather than defensiveness. He creates space where feelings can exist without being judged or dismissed. He learns that emotional safety is built when reactions are predictable and respectful. He understands that unpredictability creates anxiety, and anxiety erodes love. So he becomes predictable in the best way: steady, reliable, calm. He does not promise what he cannot deliver. He delivers what he promises. He learns the discipline of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are guidelines that prevent harm. He sets boundaries for himself first, limiting impulses that would complicate trust. He understands that temptation is less dangerous when routines are strong. He keeps his routines clean, his intentions clear, his actions transparent. Transparency becomes a form of reassurance. He does not hide to avoid conflict, he reveals to build confidence. He understands that secrecy breeds suspicion, even when there is nothing to hide. So he chooses openness, even when it feels uncomfortable. He accepts that equality is not sameness. He does not confuse fairness with duplication. He learns to respond to individual needs without turning those responses into comparisons. He understands that care must be tailored, not copied. He pays attention to what brings peace to each home, what causes strain, what needs reinforcement. He adjusts without resentment, knowing that adaptation is part of responsibility. He does not keep score, because scorekeeping turns love into a transaction. He gives because it is right, not because it will be matched. He learns patience not as passive waiting, but as active endurance. He endures misunderstandings without hardening. He endures criticism without collapsing. He endures his own doubts without surrendering to them. Doubt visits him often, especially in quiet moments. He acknowledges it without letting it lead. He returns to his principles, to the reasons he committed, to the values he wants reflected in his actions. He knows that clarity is not constant, but integrity can be. He understands that presence is physical, emotional, and mental. Being in the same room is not enough. He puts away distractions. He makes eye contact. He listens with the intent to understand, not to respond. He remembers that attention is a form of love that costs nothing but discipline. He offers reassurance through consistency rather than grand gestures. He understands that stability outlasts intensity. He accepts responsibility for the atmosphere he creates. He knows that his mood sets a tone, that tension often follows his lead. So he manages himself first. He rests when needed, seeks counsel when uncertain, learns when ignorant. He does not pretend to have all the answers. He respects wisdom from outside his own perspective. He understands that growth requires exposure to viewpoints that challenge him. He remains teachable. He learns that silence can be kind or cruel depending on timing. He chooses silence when words would inflame, and he chooses speech when silence would wound. He develops judgment through experience, reflection, and humility. He learns to read the room without assuming motives. He asks for clarity rather than guessing. He avoids assumptions, knowing they are shortcuts to misunderstanding. He understands that consistency must extend to discipline and kindness alike. He does not correct harshly in one home and gently in another. He maintains the same standard of respect everywhere he stands. He understands that double standards create distance. He holds himself to the highest standard, knowing that leadership begins with example. He models patience, accountability, and respect, not because he is perfect, but because he is responsible. He accepts that balance is not a static state, but a continuous adjustment. What worked yesterday may not work today. He remains attentive, flexible, responsive. He understands that rigidity breaks relationships while flexibility preserves them. He adjusts schedules, expectations, and approaches as life changes. He remains grounded in principles even as circumstances shift. He recognizes the importance of gratitude. He expresses appreciation regularly, not as flattery, but as acknowledgement. He understands that being seen and valued strengthens connection. He does not assume that love understands itself. He communicates it through words and actions. He remembers that neglect often begins with assumption. He faces conflict directly but calmly. He does not triangulate, does not vent to one about the other, does not create alliances. He keeps issues where they belong. He addresses problems privately, respectfully, constructively. He understands that trust dissolves when confidentiality is broken. He protects trust as a priority. He learns to forgive both others and himself. He understands that mistakes are inevitable in complex situations. He corrects without shaming, repairs without defensiveness. He allows room for growth. He understands that perfection is not required, but effort is. He recommits daily, not because yesterday was flawless, but because today demands intention. He understands that love is sustained by habits, not impulses. He builds habits of presence, honesty, patience, and restraint. These habits carry him when emotions falter. He understands that emotions fluctuate, but habits endure. He relies on what he has trained himself to do when feelings are unclear. He becomes comfortable with being misunderstood temporarily, trusting that consistent actions will clarify over time. He does not rush to fix perceptions at the cost of integrity. He allows time to reveal truth. He understands that credibility is built slowly and lost quickly. He guards it carefully. He learns that self-respect is inseparable from responsibility. He does not sacrifice his values to avoid discomfort. He does not seek approval through compromise of principle. He understands that respect from others begins with respect for himself. He stands firm without becoming rigid, kind without becoming weak. He remains aware that love requires maintenance. He schedules conversations, plans moments of connection, revisits expectations. He treats relationships as living systems that require care. He does not wait for crisis to invest effort. He invests consistently, knowing that prevention is quieter than repair. He understands that responsibility includes emotional regulation. He does not allow anger to decide. He does not allow fear to freeze him. He acknowledges emotions without being ruled by them. He practices calm as a skill. He understands that calm is contagious. He accepts that the path he walks requires maturity beyond impulse. He chooses long-term peace over short-term relief. He chooses honesty over convenience. He chooses effort over avoidance. He understands that responsibility is heavy, but it builds strength. He carries it not as a burden, but as a commitment he renews each day. A man who loves two wives learns early that justice is not loud, and it is never dramatic. It does not announce itself, and it does not seek validation. Justice lives in small, repeated decisions that rarely get noticed but always get felt. He understands that the moment he begins to compare, he loses balance. Comparison turns care into competition, and competition poisons peace. So he trains his mind to see each relationship as whole, complete, and deserving on its own. He refuses to let one become a reference point for the other. He knows that once comparisons begin, resentment is already forming, quietly, patiently, waiting to grow. He learns that fairness is not about equal emotions, because emotions cannot be measured. It is about equal dignity. He gives dignity through consistency, through tone, through presence. He is careful with his words, knowing that even casual statements can echo longer than intended. He avoids phrases that weigh one against the other, even unintentionally. He understands that a single careless sentence can undo weeks of effort, so he speaks with intention, choosing clarity over convenience. Justice requires him to check his own biases. He knows that comfort can influence behavior, that familiarity can shape reactions. He stays alert to patterns in himself. He asks whether his patience is consistent, whether his listening is equal, whether his respect is steady. He does not assume fairness, he verifies it through reflection. He understands that self-honesty is the foundation of justice. Without it, fairness becomes an illusion. He tells himself to sleep better at night. He accepts that needs will differ, and justice does not mean responding the same way to different needs. He learns to respond appropriately without creating imbalance. He understands that one may need reassurance while the other needs space, and neither need is superior. He avoids labeling needs as excessive or unreasonable. He treats them as signals, not threats. He understands that unmet needs do not disappear, they turn into distance. He becomes careful with time, because time is where comparison begins most easily. He structures his schedule with transparency, not secrecy. He does not allow time to be guessed or assumed. He communicates clearly, knowing that uncertainty breeds suspicion. He understands that fairness in time is not just hours counted, but quality protected. He is fully present where he is, not distracted by where he must be next. He knows that divided attention feels like neglect. Even when intentions are good, justice demands emotional neutrality during conflict. He does not side emotionally with one against the other. He does not become defensive to protect his comfort. He listens without ranking pain. He understands that pain does not compete, it exists. He validates feelings without validating accusations. He separates emotion from conclusion. He knows that acknowledging hurt does not mean accepting blame unfairly. He holds space for feelings while still holding truth. He resists the temptation to explain one relationship using the language of the other. He understands that explanations can sound like comparisons in disguise. He keeps narratives separate. He protects the privacy of each bond, refusing to share details that do not belong. He knows that trust breaks when boundaries blur. He guards confidentiality as an act of justice. He learns that justice requires consistency and discipline and kindness. He does not allow leniency in one place and strictness in another. He keeps his standards steady, his expectations clear. He understands that inconsistency feels like favoritism, even when it is accidental. He corrects himself when he notices imbalance. He adjusts quickly, not defensively. He accepts that his role is not to be liked equally at all times. Justice may create discomfort in the short term. He does not chase immediate approval. He focuses on long-term stability. He understands that fairness sometimes feels cold to emotion, but it builds warmth over time. He stays firm when necessary, gentle when possible. He learns to manage external influences. He does not allow opinions from outside to shape internal justice. He understands that outsiders often see fragments, not the whole. He listens respectfully but decides independently. He anchors his decisions in principle rather than pressure. He understands that justice collapses when leadership seeks applause. He pays attention to how he celebrates, how he gives, how he acknowledges effort. He avoids gestures that elevate one publicly while minimizing the other. He understands that visibility matters. He balances recognition carefully, not mechanically but thoughtfully. He understands that neglect often hides in celebration given unevenly. He remains aware that justice is tested most during stress. Fatigue reveals preferences. Impatience reveals bias. He monitors himself closely during these moments. He rests when possible, slows decisions when tired. He understands that exhaustion makes fairness fragile. He does not trust rushed judgments. He learns that justice requires emotional maturity. He does not project frustration from one situation into another. He resets mentally before each interaction. He treats each moment as new, not colored by previous tension. He understands that carrying emotional residue creates unfair reactions. He clears himself before engaging. He understands that justice is also how he speaks about each wife when she is not present. He avoids tone shifts, avoids jokes that diminish, avoids casual dismissals. He knows that respect behind closed doors matters as much as respect in public. He protects dignity consistently. He accepts responsibility for correcting misunderstandings promptly. He does not allow confusion to linger. He clarifies without blame. He explains decisions calmly, without justification that sounds like comparison. He understands that explanation is not defense, it is communication. He communicates early to prevent narratives from forming. He learns to say no with balance. He does not compensate guilt with excess. He does not overgive in one place to offset restraint in another. He understands that overcompensation creates imbalance just as much as neglect. He keeps his responses measured. He recognizes that justice is visible in routines. Small habits reveal priorities. He maintains routines intentionally, knowing that routine is reassurance. He does not allow chaos to decide patterns. He decides them consciously. He understands that fairness also includes himself. He does not punish himself endlessly for learning curves. He corrects without self-hatred. He understands that a broken L eater cannot maintain justice. He maintains his own stability to protect the whole. He remains patient with the process. He knows that justice is not proven in days, but in patterns over time. He allows consistency to speak for him. He trusts repetition. He understands that fairness becomes believable when it is boring, predictable, steady. He understands that justice without comparison is not passive. It is active awareness, daily discipline, constant recalibration. It demands that he stays awake to his choices, alert to subtle shifts, honest about his shortcomings. He carries this responsibility quietly, knowing that when justice is done right, it does not draw attention. It creates peace. A man who loves two wives learns that real strength is rarely loud. It does not announce itself through control or dominance. It reveals itself through restraint, through the ability to pause when every impulse says react, to stay grounded when pressure pulls from opposite directions. He understands that without restraint, strength becomes chaos. With restraint, strength becomes stability. He realizes that the greatest threat to peace is not conflict itself, but ungoverned reaction. So he trains himself to slow down, to respond instead of react, to choose composure when emotions surge. He becomes aware of his inner tempo. When stress rises, his instincts urge him to fix quickly, to decide fast, to end discomfort. He resists that urge. He understands that rushed decisions often favor convenience over wisdom. He gives himself space before responding, allowing clarity to replace impulse. He understands that restraint is not suppression, it is direction. It is guiding energy instead of releasing it carelessly. He learns that calm is not weakness, it is mastery. He practices restraint in speech first. Words are easy to release and impossible to retrieve. He chooses silence when words would cut. He chooses fewer words when many would confuse. He understands that explanation given too early can sound like justification, and justification can feel dismissive. He waits for the right moment, the right tone, the right state of mind. He understands that timing is part of truth. Truth delivered without restraint can become harm. He restrains his ego. He does not need to win arguments to prove leadership. He does not need to be right to maintain authority. He allows others to finish speaking without interruption. He listens fully, even when he disagrees. He understands that being heard often matters more than being corrected. He lets go of the need to control narratives. He allows reality to unfold without forcing outcomes. He learns restraint in emotion. When anger surfaces, he acknowledges it internally without letting it drive his behavior. He does not deny emotion, but he does not hand it the steering wheel. He breathes through it, observes it, lets it pass before deciding. He understands that emotions are signals, not commands. He responds to the message without obeying the impulse. He practices restraint in attention. He does not allow distractions to steal presence. He limits what he allows into his mental space. He understands that scattered attention leads to shallow connection. He chooses depth over quantity. He stays where he is, mentally and emotionally, instead of drifting toward what comes next. He understands that divided presence feels like absence. He restrains comparison, knowing it weakens judgment. He restrains favoritism, knowing it poisons trust. He restrains assumptions, knowing they shortcut understanding. He questions his interpretations before acting on them. He checks whether his reactions are based on facts or feelings. He slows the process of judgment to allow truth to surface. He learns restraint in desire. He understands that not every want deserves expression. He recognizes that unchecked desire creates imbalance. He disciplines himself to act in alignment with principle rather than impulse. He understands that freedom without discipline leads to regret. Discipline without restraint leads to rigidity. He balances both. He restrains his need for immediate comfort. When situations feel heavy, he does not escape through avoidance. He stays present in discomfort, knowing that endurance builds resilience. He understands that avoidance delays resolution. He faces difficulty calmly, one conversation at a time, one decision at a time. He practices restraint in response to pressure. External voices push for quick fixes, dramatic gestures, decisive displays. He resists spectacle. He chooses substance. He understands that long-term peace is built quietly. He does not perform responsibility. He lives it. He does not dramatize effort. He sustains it. He restrains over explanation. He understands that too much explanation can feel defensive. He speaks clearly, then allows space. He trusts that consistency will clarify what words cannot. He understands that credibility grows through repetition, not persuasion. He lets actions speak when language reaches its limit. He learns restraint in correction. When addressing issues, he avoids humiliation. He corrects privately, respectfully, constructively. He understands that shame damages trust. He chooses firmness without cruelty. He understands that correction done well strengthens bonds rather than weakening them. He restrains the urge to compensate. When guilt appears, he does not overgive to relieve it. He understands that imbalance created by guilt creates new problems. He stays measured. He allows decisions to be guided by fairness rather than emotion. He understands that restraint protects equity. He practices restraint with time. He does not overschedule to prove commitment. He does not rush transitions. He allows moments breathe. He understands that presence requires margin. He creates space rather than filling every gap. He understands that rest is not neglect, it is preparation. He restrains defensiveness. When confronted, he listens before responding. He resists explaining himself immediately. He considers feedback carefully. He accepts correction where valid. He understands that defensiveness blocks growth. He chooses openness even when it feels uncomfortable. He learns restraint in expectation. He does not demand immediate understanding. He allows others time to process. He understands that clarity unfolds differently for each person. He stays patient with the pace of emotional adaptation. He understands that pressure accelerates resistance. He restrains himself during fatigue. He knows that exhaustion weakens judgment. He delays important conversations when depleted. He understands that tired decisions often create tomorrow's problems. He protects his energy to protect fairness. He practices restraint in celebration and disappointment alike. He remains steady during highs and lows. He does not let success inflate his confidence or failure erode it. He stays grounded. He understands that stability comes from emotional regulation, not circumstance. He restrains the need to be understood immediately. He allows misunderstanding to exist temporarily. He trusts that consistent behavior will correct perception over time. He understands that restraint requires patience. He allows time to do its work. He becomes disciplined in reflection. He reviews his actions regularly, adjusting quietly. He corrects patterns before they become problems. He understands that self-correction is a form of strength. He does not wait for crisis to change. He understands that restraint is not passive. It is active effort, continuous awareness, intentional pause. It requires strength to hold back, to wait, to choose the long path over the easy one. He carries this discipline daily, knowing that restraint is what turns strength into safety, power into peace, and responsibility into stability.